Peace.
Yo, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Clear and perfect.
Yes, sir. What's cracking with you, boy?
Hey, let me tell you right now, it's an honor to be speaking with you tonight. I thank you for the opportunity. Uh, I don't want to waste any time, so I'm going to jump right into this is History Lesson, episode 81 with the legendary Arabian Prince, one of the founding members of NWA. Thank you, sir, for joining us this evening.
Anytime, anytime.
Let's take it all the way back. Where were you born and raised?
Born and raised in Compton, California, 1965, June 17th, during the Watch riots.
What was life like growing up in LA or Compton and all that during your teenage years?
Man, I tell people, it was just like anybody else growing up in the hood, man. You had the goods, the bads. One thing that I had in my favor, and I always give shout out to my crazy uncles who kind of was the ones doing all the dirt in the neighborhood. They didn't want me out there doing the kind of things that they were doing. So they kind of like protected me. And because they was crazy, a lot of other people didn't. So I had that little, that's my uncle, the James boy. Don't worry about that, So they used to run the Centennial High School back in the day in Compton when I was young. So I had a little clout.
Dope.
Yeah.
What kind of obstacles did you have to endure growing up, if any?
Man, I think, honestly, man, it was the gangs and the drugs and all of that kind of stuff, in the hood, because depending on the neighborhood you lived in, you either was in a gang, you were gang affiliated, or you had to had a ghetto pass. So you knew everybody. They knew you. Like I was in the sports. I was in the football and all that kind of stuff. So they was kind of like cool with me. And I went to Catholic school, so I was the one that was like early on getting chased home wearing that green sweater tie all day. So,
right.
Yeah.
Growing up, before you got into music, who was some of your earlier influences music-wise that started having you gravitate toward making this as your career?
Yeah, so like I said, I always go back to my uncle, man. He was like my kind of musical mentor because he's the dude that had the record, that had all the vinyl, 8-track cassettes, stuff like that. And my father, he worked at a radio station. So when he had his talk radio show, I would sit in the control room playing with records. But my early influences were, Prince, Parliament Funkadelic, and Kraftwerk, and also the Last Poets. Those were my like 4 influences.
Growing up in California, what was some of your earlier firsthand experiences of music? Was it like a block party? Was it a concert? What was the first thing that you seen firsthand music-wise?
1977 at the Forum, Parliament Funkadelic, the landing of the mothership. And, being a little kid at that concert, 2 things happened. One, I was high as a kite because everybody was smoking. And the second thing, I got to see, George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic and Bootsy and everybody on stage. And that life, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to perform. Like, I was always a shy kid, but it was just that thing seeing people on stage. And they were dressed up in costumes, too. So that was something that, like, as a kid, like, hey, they got a spaceship. They got on, like, costumes. They got a big-ass flashlight. Like, I'm all in. So that was my influence right there.
So how did you get into music? Did you play instruments at first? Was it producing, writing? What was your first foray into music?
So, like I mentioned, my pops had a radio show, and I would sit in the control room with music, and then I figured out how to make mixtapes. I would make these little cassette mixtapes when I was like 13, 14 years old. I would take them to school and sell them for lunch money. And I would get paid doing that, and I naturally became a DJ because of that. And I started DJing all the little elementary school dances and junior high school dances and eventually high school dances. And that's what kind of like turned me into getting the records. And me and Dr. Dre, Egyptian Lover, all of us were unknown DJs. We were all DJs on the West Coast, right? And we used to all hang out. And I wasn't really in any particular crew. I was like that young kid who knew a lot about technology. So everybody had in the studio showing them how to drum and the sequencers and stuff like that. So when everybody started making records, I remember Dre and Yella and Lonzo from the record crew, they were all like, oh, we about to go make a record. I'm like, damn. And then the Lover and Uncle Jam Johnson. them too. They're like, we gonna make a record. And then I looked around and looked for my crew, and I was like, damn, I ain't got no crew. So I'm like, well, I guess I'll go make a record by myself. And I went to the studio and made my first record.
So before gangster rap, there was electro funk. Can you take us back to the origins of that and how you got involved in that?
Yeah, so I got to give ups to Kraftwerk, man. Kraftwerk was kind of like the birth of electro funk, because if you listen to Planet Rock took the little lick from Trans Europe Express, was Kraftwerk's one of their first tunes back in the day, and because of that, you know, what we call the 808 beat, that Planet Rock and the Kraftwerk sound kind of birthed that little movement for the pop lockers and the break dancers. And on the West Coast, we were all in the partying. So that sound was really, really down with us. And we started building songs off of that. And everybody on the West Coast, man, including Ice-T, was doing, you know, electro funk at one point or another.
Can you take us back to some of the dues you paid as a solo artist before the NWA, just as Arabian Prince in around 84 or so? What was some of the dues you were paying as a solo artist?
When the dues I was what? I couldn't hear that part.
Some of the dues you were paying early on?
Paying? Like money?
No,
or,
dues, like the, you know, dues. Like,
dues. Oh, like paying dues.
Right.
Oh, I don't know. I wasn't really paying no dues, man. Like we started it. Like the good thing about what I was doing on the West Coast, man, it was like we built that sound and built that culture. I had a club called The Cave at 16 years old in Lenox, California, right next to Hawthorne and Inglewood. And I got that club because working at a pet store, and the dude who owned the pet store owned a little community center. And I asked him what he was doing with it on the weekend, and I'm like, well, can I turn it into a club? And it became like this dope club on the west side, and we were just killing it for about a year. And you know, we made music, but that was it, man. We were just, West Coast was like a family, man. Everybody was kind of like helping each other out, come up, and it all kind of came up together.
You also produced Bobby Jimmy and the Critters and MC Smooth. Can you tell me about that creative process back then?
Yeah, so that was interesting. So when I made my first record, I didn't know how to get it pressed to put out. And I heard everybody going to this pressing plant Hollywood called CocaCola. And so I went down to CocaCola, and when I got there, Bobby Jimmy was there. He's named Park. He was at the morning DJ Payday back in the day. And I walked in to get my record pressed, and heard it. And he was like, man, like, who produced that? I'm like, me? He said, oh, are you a producer? I wasn't a producer. I was the first thing I had ever done. I'm like, yeah, I'm a producer. And he's like, man, I like that song. He said, I tell you what, let's do a deal. I'll put your record out on my label, and you can produce us. And I'm like, really? All right. So I ended up producing all the Bobby Jimmy and the Critter stuff, and bumped in MC Smooth at, I think, a concert somewhere, and then we went on to produce JJ Fat songs, and, you know, a lot of stuff on the web. But yeah, I started just walking into a record, pressing print, and, you know, bumping into something.
At this point in time, is Egyptian Lover and Dr. Dre in the mix with you?
Yeah, we was all homies, you know, like we was all like hanging out. Like I was younger a little bit. I ain't trying to put Eazy on spot, but he was a couple years older than me. And I would go to the Uncle Jam's Army dances early on, and start hanging out with him. Got to play at a couple of them. Got to kind of be part of the crew. And we was there. He got his first 808, and we kind of learned how to use that together in his garage. I was down with the wrecking crew. I was always in their camp. You know, when they was messing around with the DMX, the DX drum machine, the Oberheim stuff. So yeah, I was just kind of that dude or that kid that was just in everybody's mix, you know, to help out where I could.
At this point, you maybe seem to lean more toward Dr. Dre, hanging out with him more. Is your screen phrasing? Your screen better?
Yeah.
Okay. What was Dr. Dre's vision early on that made you believe in what he was doing and start heading in that direction?
I think that, you know, from the electro funk stuff that we were doing. It was cool. We had a great time. And what happened was Ray bumped into Eazy-E at swap meet. And we was a little disgruntled because, you know, we was making a lot of hit records on the West, but we really wasn't getting paid the money we should have been getting paid. Because we was young. We didn't know nothing about publishing writers, you know, and stuff like that, royalties. We were just getting paid to do that. And it turned out to be something that became a new kind of business model because Eazy was trying to get out of what he was doing, being like a neighborhood pharmaceutical technician. And, you know, me and Dre were looking for an opportunity to do something else. And we came together, and that sound came out of us growing up in the hood and being like harassed by the police, seeing all the crime, drugs, and all that stuff going on. That's where that's from.
So at this point, it's just you, Dre, and Eazy. What's the game plan at this point between you three before involving anybody else?
So we was just hanging out trying to figure it out because we weren't even really thinking about doing a label or anything. And MC Ren was Eazy-E's homeboy that lived down the street from him. Yella was in the wrecking crew with Dre. Ice Cube lived down the street from Dre's aunt, and he was always down with us, but he had just got sent away to college. And when we started putting this whole thing together, it was kind of, still didn't know what was going on. We just messed around. And then Cube came back, and Cube was like this prolific writer. Him and Ren, both of them, like prolific writers, and, you know, putting mad lyrics down. Came back summer from school, and the rest was history. Like, everybody just kind of fell in line, and we just started, we put out the EP, the NWA EP, and then, you know, followed it over straight out of
If we can rewind just a little bit, can you tell me your reaction when the guys came up with the name NWA? What was your immediate reaction to the name of the group?
So we still, and I somebody said it's echo, and I can kind of hear echo in too. I don't know why it is. We'll get through this. The whole thing with the name, we were at my mom's house, and no one still really knows who came up with the name. From what I recall, I think we were just talking to somebody, just said something like, "Man, I feel like a nigga with an attitude," like that. That could be something kind of interesting. And we just did the NWA thing and, you know, let people kind of figure it out for themselves.
What was some of your earlier conversations that you guys had that, you know, knowing the direction you guys wanted to go in as far as, you know, with this NWA thing?
Say that again one more time. You broke up right in the middle.
Just the conversations you guys were having as far as the direction you guys wanted this thing to go. You just left the whole electro funk thing. Now you're going into this gangster rap. What kind of conversations did you guys have as far as the direction you guys wanted to go toward?
You know what's funny, man? There really wasn't any kind of conversations about it. That we were just making beats and doing stuff and just and talking about what was going on. Because we would always go to the Compton spot meet. You couldn't go like 35 feet without getting harassed by the police every day in Compton. And that was just a story topic that we wanted to get into. Or you couldn't walk around a corner without seeing a strawberry, like, you know, crackheads and all of that. And it became something we wanted to kind of get into and talk about. And, you know, like I said, Q was just writing that stuff. And, you know, we had the beats. And what we realized is people always ask, why was there one fast cut on both the albums, you know? And that was because of the background that we came from. We already were known for doing that. So we knew that doing a bunch of gangster rap wasn't going to get much radio play at the time. And we weren't really trying to do clean versions of anything. So we put one clean song on every album, like on Eazy-E, we had radio. That was the clean cut to put on the radio so people knew that there was that. And that's why we did. But, you know, we just had fun, man. Like, it wasn't like we were plotting to like, take over the world, maybe later on, but not in the beginning.
Right. How did you guys end up getting with CocaCola Records?
You know, like I said, it was just one of those things where everybody was on CocaCola early. From the first, like, people on from the first people on the West Coast, everybody was on it, doing that thing. And it was kind of like we stayed, got our records pressed, and put them out. And we left when we got the deal with Priority Records, and also found out that CocaCola was bootlegging and selling our stuff across the country out the back door too, you know.
Can you tell the viewers what the difference was between the 4-song EP and what the stores were selling?
Yeah, so we had the 4-song EP, which was just called NWA. And what happened was when we got the Priority Records deal and went there, CocaCola Records and Don McMillan, who was the owner of CocaCola, took the same picture and found like some random songs from like the Fila Fresh crew and some other stuff, put them on there and called it NWA and a Posse.
Yep, we're back.
Yeah, so I was just saying, like, you know, it was a bootleg that CocaCola put out, and then later on he got sued, and then because it was already doing well as an album, I think it even went gold or platinum. We were just like, screw it, we'll just own up to it and keep it. But we didn't even know any of the other songs on there.
You unfortunately was left out of the movie Straight Outta Compton, which is a travesty. I mean, you were there with them early on throughout the movie. Should have had scenes. Can you take us back to some of the early performances, like at the skating rink? What was the atmosphere like, and what was the reception like early on during NWA's performances?
Yeah, so two things. One, my character was in the movie, but it was cut out. Like, I remember people were sending me photos and like, there you are. I'm like, really? So, you know, what? But the early days was crazy, man. I remember we were going to, like, we should DJ at World on Wheels, Daytime USA in Compton. And when we got a chance to perform and go back there as NWA, you know, gangs and that whole thing kind of went up to another level. And it was always crazy in there, man. The concerts were like, we barely got out alive with some of the things. I remember we got shot at a couple of times at leaving some of the venues and stuff like that. But hey, we're still here.
Around this time, I think Jerry Heller got with you guys. What was your first meeting like with him, and what was your were you leery at first, or was it all business?
You know, I didn't really know Jerry, but my homies would always tell me like everybody else knew Jerry because he'd been around, right? And people would always say, watch him. He could do some good for you, but watch him. And Eazy wasn't really a businessman, didn't know anything about music or anything. They started talking and started doing some stuff. And it was kind of crazy. He came up with a record deal. He got this deal pending. And I think part of the reason they got the deal was, you know, I had brought Supersonic back over there, and Supersonic was blowing up. And I had put it out on Dream Team Records at first. And when I wasn't getting paid over there for it, I brought it back and put it on Ruthless Records because we had just started that label. I'm like, this is our label. We family. Let me put this over here so we can like generate money for us so we can do other stuff. I put Dre and Yellow's name on it as co-producers, so we was, you know, we was all cool. And it started making money for us, and record companies started looking at us like, they got a hit. What else you got? And NWA was already blowing up, so it made it easier for Jerry to go get a deal. But when he went and got the deal, you know, the money didn't flow in the right direction, you know, so that's what I got. I kind of got me an attorney and took care of my business.
So at what point did the JJ Fad thing come into play? Were you doing this while the NWA thing was going on? Was JJ Fad before NWA?
So me and Dre, and this is a funny story too. Dre don't like me telling the story. Dre damn near a billionaire. He probably don't care what story I tell. But he used to have this RX-7, Mazda RX-7, with no back window because we did a concert and somebody broke out his back window and stole his record jacket and his, I think, Alpine radio or Blackhawk radio out of the car. So we didn't have no money to get it fixed, but we were still chasing women. So we used to mess around with these girls that lived in Rialto, which ended up being JJ Fad. And we used to just hang out with them. And they would always say, we want to make music. We want to make rap. And Dre was like, I ain't fucking y'all whack. Y'all ain't no rap. And one day they caught me in the studio working on something else. And I had some studio time over and we ended up messing around. doing 2 songs. We did Another Whole Bikes to Dump, and I did, and Another Whole Bikes to Dump was actually the 8th. And then when DJs got it, they started playing Supersonic. We had to go back and repress it as Supersonic as a single, and that's what blew that up. So that was right at the time, 87, 88, you know, right when we were working on that next NWA thing. And like I said, it ended up helping, you know, propel NWA.
What was some of your earlier memories of forming Ruthless Records?
Man, it was just family, dude. Like, everybody always asks us crazy questions, like, what was y'all thinking when y'all was in the studio? What was it like? I'm like, man, we was trying to figure out what we was going to eat for lunch. Like, who going to get the burritos, you know? Because doing the music was so easy. It was just fun. It's like a bunch of homies together just putting something together. So that was it. Eazy was crazy. So everything you see who Eazy was, that's who he is. Crazy. And it was just fun times.
Do you remember what your contract, the details of your contract was back then?
So that's what I'm saying. There was no contract. So when we did NWA, we was homies and we shared everything equally. So during the first EP, everything we did, we would go down to the pressing plant. Everybody get box records or sets, and that was your money. Like, you went to the swap meet, you went to VIP records, everybody went to those companies, you sold them, and that money you got was sold. Never had a contract. When Jerry got involved, we still didn't have a contract, and that's why the money was funny. And